Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is the first of a two-part city talk on New York City, New York State, and U.S. transit. The MTA, 6 million plus riders a day, a record. A $32 billion capital plan, $15.5 billion short. The 2nd Avenue subway, East Side access, the number 7 extension, fare hikes, crumbling bridges, roads, and tunnels, East River tolls. Joining me this week and next to talk about New York City, state, and U.S. transportation infrastructure is Robert Buzz Paaswell. Dr. Paaswell is a distinguished professor of civil engineering at the City College. He is also the director of the CUNY Institute of Urban Systems and the director emeritus of the University Transportation Research Center, a federally funded center providing research and training to transportation professionals. Professor Paaswell has served on numerous city, state, federal, and international commissions and task forces. From 2009 to 2010, Professor Paaswell served as interim president of City College. Buzz, welcome back.
It's always good to be here.
Oh, it's a total pleasure, but there's a real sense of deja vu whenever I interview you. I interviewed you exactly a year ago. And except for the 6 million plus riders a day, it's the same intro as then. So there's really a case of deja vu all over again.
Well, the point is, Doug, is that nothing's gotten better because it's a researcher's dream, and I'm a researcher, so we keep it the way it is. So we get funding to study it.
And then I get to talk to you,
Absolutely.
So I'm feeding off this as well. Thank you.
I think. Before we get into the more serious questions, what you're seeing is that the city itself is continuing to grow, and as it grows, more people want to be either in the center in Manhattan, where the real estate prices are very high, or people are going to the outer boroughs and finding
the other boroughs.
The other boroughs,
Queens boy,
right?
Watch it, Buster.
Okay, I'm using the mayor's terms.
Oh, okay. Blame him.
The outer boroughs, and finding that maybe transit service isn't so great there, and to where they can afford housing.
Sure.
So there's a demand for more transit. So transit is getting packed, and there's 6 million plus riders a day, 8 million on all the MTA facilities.
A day, 8 million.
And 24 hours a day and safely, even with the odd accident and everything. It's
right.
One of the best systems in the world.
Oh, yeah, clearly. And everybody talks about, and we've talked about this before, the Paris system, the London system. I love the London system. It's great. It's fast. It's expensive, and it doesn't go even where you want to go.
Well,
and it shuts down.
See, now we'll bring you up to date. First of all, the London system goes where you want to go if you know where you're going from start to finish.
Thank you.
It's expensive because they use the money to continue to build and improve the system. So while New York has been building the 2nd Avenue subway for years, and the
Decades.
2nd Avenue, the East Side access for years, London has built Crossrail, a 40-mile
they're constantly adding subway lines.
They finished the Jubilee line extension.
Right.
Other lines, they're modernizing the system.
It's a joy. It's a joy. My wife and I were there for 5 days. We only used the subways.
Right.
We didn't wait for more than a minute, I swear, at any stop, and the transfers were wonderful. You really get spoiled. Again, it comes to something that we'll talk about in greater depth, and that is the relationship of fares and governmental monies in terms of how the system operates. But let's go to the MTA. Let's start with what it is. William Ronan, the architect of the MTA, died last week. What is it, and why is it?
Well, the MTA is like many other transit authorities around the country. The cities started with transit. People moved to the suburbs. The suburbs needed transit. And the suburbs ended up having more money than the cities, just the nature of demographics. So the MTA in New York, the RTA in Chicago, other transit authorities, SEPTA, Boston system, had to find a balance between providing service and being able to pay for the service and integrating service.
Right.
And the MTA, the mission of the MTA, of course, is to provide public transportation within the MTA service area, which is this 70-mile region.
Multi-county.
Many counties, including Long Island and Westchester and Rockland and counties north of the city. And so in order to provide what the legislature thought might be fairness, they created a structure where you could provide the amount of funding that you needed for New York City Transit, which is 80% of the ridership of the whole system.
Right.
And more than 80, it would need 80% of the budget. And keeping the other systems, Metro North, Staten Island, Subway, the Long Island Railroad, keep those solvent. And they found a brilliant way to do it. They felt that they could do it by including the Triborough Bridge in there and use bridge tolls, excess bridge tolls, as a way to put money into
and kill Robert Moses at the same time.
Yeah, that was part of the story, right? So the MTA was a very good model. It's a model that worked for many years, and I think a number of us looking at the MTA or the RTA in Chicago or other systems around the country feel that this model is running its course, that it's harder and harder to get money out of it. There's two budgets. We've talked about this before. There's an operating budget and a capital budget. The operating budget includes fares, and the fares pay for a large percentage of the operating budget, but not enough. So you need subsidies, and you have taxes and other things. And then you have a capital budget, which is totally subsidized.
Right.
Comes from issuing bonds or from grants. And
which is to develop infrastructure by rolling stock buses, subways, rail cars.
The original federal act that provided federal funding for public transit back in the 1960s was to do a replacement of rolling stock in the then aging transit system. So there still is this big requirement to replace rolling stock, which is one of the most expensive items you can have.
Sure. Okay. Let's look at let's go to this new paradigm, if you will. What are you talking about? How would it be different under Czar Paaswell?
Well, I think you have to look at how it's structured and how it's organized. I think first of all, the MTA. First of all, the MTA has two railroads, Long Island Railroad and Metro North, which operate under different operating rules. One is run by is governed by rules of the Federal Transit Administration, part of Washington, and one is governed by which is transit rules, and one is governed by Federal Railway Administration. That has to deal with how long somebody can.
Let's not get in the weeds here before you totally confuse me.
Well, but the point is that they're governed
diffuse
slightly.
Responsibility.
They're governed differently. They have different labor union titles and jobs, and it's the kind of knot that none of the previous executive directors or presidents or chairmen of the board of the MTA have been willing to untie. That has to be untied. Basically, if the New York region, and I think at the heart of everything we talk about, we should say, are we talking about the MTA today, or are we talking about public transportation that's going to serve a global capital? And if it's going to serve a global capital, which is the New York region, and if New York is going to stay a global capital, recognizing that London and Shanghai and Hong Kong are its rivals, and Shanghai and Hong Kong are going up very quickly on the line.
The number of cranes in Shanghai is just astounding.
So that you have to rethink, what does regional transportation look like? Does it include New Jersey Transit? Does it include PATH? Does it include for hire vehicles?
Okay. Wait a minute. Let me just interrupt. Is anybody planning along these lines?
Well, everybody is quote unquote planning, but I think the plans that I see are just an extension of what have we had before.
It's just an extension of trends.
It's blips on trends rather than saying, let's come up with new models for what we have, because we really need them. I know there are a lot of people that feel we should.
Give me a dramatic new element to this new model. Something that people are going to say.
A new model would be like, I think the best model that I've seen that would fit New York is Transport for London. Transport for London includes the underground, the bus system, for hire vehicles, all under one czar in a sense.
And they talk to one another?
Well, they have no choice.
Oh,
This is the way it works.
this is good.
What they've done is, and I'm not sure that this would work or should be recommended here, but what they've done in Europe and what they've done in London is they've contracted out for some of the service. So
Right.
in London, I think it's well known that London is broken up into 13 areas, all run by Transport for London, and they bid out bundles of routes in the 13
Sure.
areas to see if they could reduce the cost. This is a big
Public-private
problem.
competition, sure.
This is a big problem in the European Union. And 20 years ago, transit costs were going sky high.
Right.
So EU requires all of the transit systems, while they're held publicly, the boards or the city government or somebody is the oversight board. They do the planning, they set the schedules, they set the fares, but they're required by EU law to contract out for service.
What does that mean here? I ran against these people who are running for governor, and I win. I get sworn on January 1st. I call my friend Buzz, who knows all things transportation, and I say, Buzz, what do I do with the MTA? I need an outside the box where I'm just gonna ram this through in my first 90 days.
Well, the first thing you have to recognize is that the MTA is a success, and it's
Right.
a success in that it's providing 8 million trips a day, 24 hours a day, every day of the year, safely. I mean, that's a mantra that I cite.
And it goes huge distance.
But it's getting harder and harder to do. It needs maintenance. The state of good repair is bad. It's not making the capital investments.
The stations
Stations
outside
are awful.
Manhattan are awful, and even in Manhattan they're awful.
Some are not cream of the crop, as they say.
Oh yeah, that euphemism. Go ahead.
And so you need to basically, the MTA needs a facelift, and it needs money. So
Wait a minute, it means more than a facelift. That's surgically on the outside. It needs structural change.
Here's what the MTA really needs. It needs to modernize more than anything else. It needs new signals, new communication systems, new ways. It needs computer-based train control over the whole system, not over
How
30
far
or
away
40,
from that?
30 to 40 years.
Is that
away
what
from
they're
that.
planning on?
Yeah.
30 or 40 years?
It's
absurd.
CBC report.
I've got it right here. I know.
Yeah.
But isn't that what, that's mind blowing. What is that, a problem of planning and conceptualization?
Money.
What is
It's a
it?
problem of money. It's a problem of money.
Is it anticipation
Money
of
and priorities. Money and priorities. The system, remember that the MTA, not like LA MTA or the modern systems out west, was built as the BMT, the IND,
And the
Ls,
IRT.
and the
Oh,
IRT.
are you kidding me? I remember. Yeah, come on.
The one,
I was
you
the
know,
BMT.
The Broadway 7th Avenue line. That's my line.
Mine was the J. Go ahead.
So you have to integrate old signal systems, old track systems.
Right.
You can do that over a long period of years, or you can do crash programs. In London, the example I use, when Jay Walder was in London before he went to Hong Kong, and now he's
The former head of the MTA.
Jay found there were problems on the Central line, so they just shut it down for a year.
Right.
And they found ways of people getting around. Sometimes you have to bite the bullet and say, we're going to close parts of the line.
Which they've begun to do.
They do that on the 7, it seems, all the time.
Well, that's your train. They're doing it on purpose, Buzz.
So no, my train's the 1. So
Oh, okay.
so that you have to modernize. You have to change the fare system. The fare card that you have is probably 10 years old. Keep them as antiques. Tap
mine
and go.
could be that old.
I was just in Chicago. Chicago has tap and go. You just tap it and you go. All the trains have it. You can get discounts.
Okay. Tap and go is nice, but how much real time does it save?
It saves a lot of time in boarding and getting people and throughput on the buses. If you
I believe you. I'm just, as a social scientist, I'm
wait for
trained
bus
to
at
question.
79th and Central Park West. And
No, I do not want to. I've done that. I do not want to do that. You testified before the Transportation Reinvention Commission, which dealt with that. What was your principal argument?
3 arguments. One is, I said, who owns the MTA? The MTA needs money. And in a sense, when it needs money, it has to go to the state legislature or to the governor to find infusions of of cash or
Right.
capital, or to find out what its budget
Right.
will be for a given year. You shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to plan for 5 years in a row. This is what the properties in San Francisco and San Diego and LA do. They have their governing oversight bodies provide long-term funding so they can plan for long-term. Here, the legislature wants them to come up every year, and it's a crapshoot for what you're going to get.
Right, exactly.
So
It doesn't make
plan
sense.
that way.
Right.
And part
It's
of
a
that,
bad economic development tool.
it's
not a tool.
And it's upstate, downstate.
Okay, go ahead.
I live in Geneva. Why do I need to pay for the MTA? Well, you need to pay for the MTA because the wealth that New
generates
York is
wealth.
creating is helping, buying the cabbages that come from the farms near Geneva. So
Don't get me into one of these upstate, downstate things. I live upstate.
it's a fun
So
kind
it's
of
a
thing.
political problem.
So who owns it? And
So wait, we know who owns it.
the governor.
The
owns
governor
it
owns it.
by appointing people to the board.
That's exactly right.
But
And controlling people he may not even appoint.
most of the ridership comes from the city.
Right. So what do
And
we
the
do? Do we
city
break
has-
off?
Well, no. I think my solution to that would be to have the city have more board members on the MTA so they can have more
Well, what's the
decision making.
breakout right now?
I think the city only gets to appoint 4 of the 17 or so
Right.
board members. In Chicago, on the
Which
RTA,
you ran that system.
But we were part of the RTA. The RTA had more suburban board members than city board members, but the few city board members could veto any budget. They had
Certain
an extraordinary
prerogatives, yeah,
prerogative
veto
to do the
powers,
budget.
yeah.
So how would the city get more board members? I think that the city should contribute more to the MTA. If I was mayor of New York, and I'm not mayor of New York, it's probably a
But
hard
this is
job.
obvious. Thank you.
It's a hard job, and our current mayor is doing an excellent job. But if I were mayor of New York,
Political plug
I
from
would,
Buzz
I
Paaswell.
would,
Go
I
ahead.
would, no, I would want to have ownership of the MTA because people in the city,
Who? The mayor?
yeah, the people ownership in the sense that I have some control over scheduling.
Yeah, but you know that it's a clash of institutions and personalities that ain't going to happen.
And to do that, the city would have to contribute more. I think that's a problem that
Do you
has to be
think the
solved.
state would take more money and give us more votes? I don't think so.
I think, but it has to. There's got to be pressure to do that, and pressure could come from the papers. It could come from developers who want to develop in the city and who want to make sure that their customers can still
Okay,
get
let's
to their.
form a firm to No, go ahead.
No. I mean, and well, we didn't get around to other changes. I would
Go.
make. One of the changes I would make it would be in how the MTA is funded. Right now, the MTA is funded by taxpayers primarily, or by the issuance of debt,
Right.
Which
Which
the
ultimately
riders,
is taxpayers.
and the riders pay for that through the
Right.
fare box because
Right,
they're
that's true, too.
repaying the debt through the fare box. So, who benefits by this? Developers, employers. You have to look at cities like Paris, like London, where
The regional
employers,
economy benefits.
where employers pay in Paris and London. Employers pay a certain fee that goes goes right back to public transit. Crossrail was built with a lot of the developers along the way paying for stations or station improvements. So when I think of the Second Avenue subway, my feeling was every station along the Second Avenue subway should have been paid for by a developer. You're building the line out to serve Related's development on the far west side. Related should be paying
Yeah,
a big amount of money
I
for
mean,
that
huge
access.
public subsidy. Huge
the
public
public
subsidy.
is paying
I
for their
understand.
huge, and that's huge profit. That's 40 years of building millions of square feet
that's
of floor
at least
space.
3 other shows talking about how politics really works around town.
Well, you see, so
Okay, so who owns it? We don't. I mean, right now the governor owns it. You said you want more city
the governor
ownership.
and the taxpayers own it.
Okay.
The taxpayers
What
get left
about
holding it.
what about organization structurally? I mean,
It needs to be revisited, and that's a whole. That's a complicated.
Here we go.
And
We're in the
gonna talk
weeds.
about information
We're
now.
in the weeds.
We're not in the weeds.
Go ahead.
This is the age of information. This is the age of real-time
Right.
information. When we know just about everything in real time. We can.
I
we
would
can know-
imagine.
we can know where all the trains are, where all the buses are, where
all the
people are,
passengers are.
where the passengers are by their cell phones or contacts. We know maintenance history. We know structural condition, all these things. So that says the MTA, which was built as a stovepipe organization,
Meaning?
bus maintenance, rail maintenance, and under maintenance,
Okay.
body maintenance, electrical shops, and everything. We can think differently. Why do we have separate maintenances for each of the properties? We might not need that anymore. And, electrical work is electrical work. Information is information. The fact
They haven't
that-
thought of this already?
well, it's coming. They're thinking of it.
Oh,
But
God.
nobody is designing for them. They have a group in the MTA, a very bright group in the MTA, looking at something called asset management. This is going
Yeah,
to be part of
yeah,
it.
exactly.
And this asset management is part of it. And I think that group is going to come up with solutions for how can you use information to make the organization more efficient and look different than it
Yeah, but
does today.
it's more than just simply the use of information. It's the structures that you create to use the information in
Right.
the most effective and efficient way.
So-
So you got to have structural change.
Yeah, exactly. What you have on one
You have to
hand,
take down the silos.
you have one old model with people who have different longevities in there
Right.
and are basically
Okay.
tenured in the system.
Okay.
And you want to go into a new system.
And then at the same time, you're talking about modernization.
Modernization is the key to the whole thing.
Okay, let's talk money here. $32 billion capital plan.
Right.
They can't fund 15.5
Right.
billion of it. The governor calls it bloated. Talk about the capital budget.
Well-
is it bloated? What does it mean to be bloated? Are the goals bloated? Are the means that to pay it bloated? Talk about that.
Well, the capital budget is a sum of what are the capital needs now and 5 years into the future, plus what has been left on the table from previous capital budgets.
And by capital, you mean what?
Rolling stock, new lines, new stations, new facilities.
Signals.
Anything, new signals, new track.
Communication. Okay, go ahead.
New communication.
Wi-Fi,
So
hopefully.
that's
Thank you.
That's
Go
coming.
ahead.
But the problem is, I think, is that it's time for the MTA to come and say, this is our big capital budget. Maybe we should go back and look at how we set priorities in the past and begin to siphon off things that aren't top priority and work what I consider to be the first thing rapidly on modernization.
Right.
I think that
Right.
and
the Citizens Budget Commission in their
Right.
October 2014 policy brief really laid this out very clearly.
they did. It was great.
Go ahead.
What I liked about it is it agreed with my testimony.
Oh,
What can I
hey.
say?
I mean,
That's just a-
to have,
that's just a
to
professor
have
with his
your
self-love,
wisdom
right.
corroborated is
Right,
always
no,
a nice
no.
feeling.
So we started talking about modernization is the key. And the interesting thing about modernization is you can't buy a new bus or a new rail car that isn't a high-tech bus
Right.
or rail car. You can't buy a
Right.
50 Chevrolet anymore.
Right.
You have to buy a new one. So what you're doing is you're putting technically high-quality rolling stock on track
An
that really
antiquated
doesn't have
system,
the,
yeah.
the ability
Right.
to
Okay.
address it.
So does the capital plan as proposed by the MTA provide for the adequate, timely replacement and upgrading of its capital?
It probably adequate is a good word. Timely is probably not a good word.
Well, yeah, but it's not adequate if it's over 30 years. So are we, okay, and then after that, what's the next level?
Well,
In a sense, there are three tiers here. One is the tier you just talked about. And in a sense, that's the most money in the capital plan. Go ahead.
well, the most money in the capital plan is the rolling stock and the big projects, the Second Avenue subway and East Side Access, which is taking a tremendous amount of money, and of course rebuilding the South Ferry Station,
Right.
which was
Right,
a tragedy,
Sandy, right.
and the new money that they have to put in to make the system resilient against future hurricanes and things they didn't think of 5 years ago. So that all of these add, and capital, that plus the fact that costs keep going up.
Right.
You buy steel, you
Labor
pay
costs.
wages, whatever, they keep going up. So $1 today is 80 cents tomorrow.
Right.
So, and that's over 5 years, you can see where that's going. So I think the capital program needs to have a look at and priorities reset, and
Okay,
my
wait,
urging is to rush forward with the modernization part, the new signals. And
Okay, so I think what I hear you saying, and I think that I certainly read in the Budget Commission report, is that if these numbers are in a sense real and you want to achieve your primary goals, you might have to sacrifice, for example, the East Side access. You might have to sacrifice the 2nd Avenue subway, and I remember it decades ago, to do what you need to do, and that is fix the stock, fix the signals, and upgrade the technology. Is that what you're saying?
Well, to a certain extent. Let me. You know,
Okay,
I love these
projects.
I love these projects too. So I don't want to just say stop them. It could be delay them or find other sources of funding for
Right.
it. As I said,
Right. Oh, you need a 2nd Avenue subway. Don't get me wrong.
I think you've got to be much more serious about the fact that some of the beneficiaries should pay their fair share.
Right.
And the city's always been afraid of it. It's like telling Trump, who built all these buildings along the west side, so that my state's 72nd Street and 59th Street, these are all clogged stations, and you go up and down the 1 and 2 and 3. These
And he didn't
trains are
pay.
clogged. Paid a few $1,000s for a park. And the thought, you know, the sense is you threaten him and he'll say he's going to move elsewhere. He's not going to build in Iowa, or he's going to build right
South
there.
Dakota,
and
right.
pass the money on to his investors. So the city's got to begin playing hardball.
Well,
with
I mean,
developers.
okay, now wait. Institutionally, that would be the City Planning Commission?
That would be the mayor's office.
Well, right, obviously the mayor's
Through-
office, but
City planning, economic development, both of these.
okay. You're coming back for next week, so
Same tie.
same shirt and tie. Thank you.
Right.
My thanks to Robert Paaswell for being on the show and for agreeing to continue our conversation. Join us next week here on CUNY TV. I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.